This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We're joined today by David Schull. David is one of the most fascinating guys ever. He's the president of a firm called Russo Partners, but he does so many interesting things. Probably the most thing he should be most proud of is the magnificent children that he's raised with his wife. But David, tell us a little bit about yourself and Russo Partners, and we'll go from there.
Scott, great to be back here on this podcast. It's the best of the best when you work with Scott. Our firm, Russo Partners, is celebrating its 36th anniversary. We work with emerging healthcare companies in your industry, as you know, mostly biopharma, medtech, device, digital health. Our work is focused on corporate communications to create the profile so these companies can raise money, whether it's through venture capital or a private company to take it public, and then also through strategic partnering. So think of it as you take a startup healthcare company that realizes it needs to put on the right public face. My team, which is comprised of PhDs and MDs and a few former journalists, we help them to do that. We do that regularly, and we do it very well.
Thank you. And talk about what you're most focused on and excited about this year. What are you most focused on and excited about this year?
So because of our focus in the area of biotech, I'm excited because of the numbers we saw in the first quarter to indicate that biotech is back. If you look at in financings, what happened in the first quarter of 2024, all of a sudden we went from what was a down year to an up year with a big number of pipes in particular. So that type of investment vehicle has skyrocketed. At the same time, I'm excited because there are deals announced on almost a daily basis. So the companies with which we work have opportunities first to raise money through these vehicles such as pipes. They also have opportunities now to ramp up the work in business development because there are purchases out there. And this is following what has been the longest down stretch in market in biotech that dates back to 2021. So it's been a long time coming. And now we're hoping in our industry that this maintains itself and we see a good run into the second half of the year.
Thank you. Fantastic. You're watching biotech closely. Do you want to talk for a moment about some of your people that you work with that are very active there and some of the things they're doing?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that we've worked on in the financing area, and remember, we're the communicators, we're not the financiers. However, it's tough for a small company to go public through a traditional means. Therefore, you've seen over the years, and Scott, you and I talked about it, the SPACs, so the special purpose acquisition companies that were in favor and then they fell out. You see companies that look to access the public markets through reverse merger, but that comes with a whole host of issues. And so we have companies that have been very creative. One of the best stories that I know you and your listeners would love, we work with a company out of Houston called Fibrobiologics. It's developing therapies from fibroblasts, similar to a stem cell therapy company. After the board and the CEO, Pete O'Hearn, looked at the ways to take this company public, they went a completely different route. They did the public offering themselves, a direct public offering. And my team of communicators actually leveraged social media channels, earned media, and more to help drive interest because there were no underwriters. There were no banks involved in selling large blocks of shares. It was us, the communications team. That deal happened on January 31. That stock trades around $10. The market cap is $300 million. I look at that compared to some of the companies that have gone public. They're now trading well below cash. So it's an amazing type of story. We're seeing that type of creativity today, and it's been a necessity because of the market.
Fascinating, isn't it? And so you've got clients like that, customers like that. And how did the biotech, I mean, you're absolutely right. The window for raising capital is closed for a while. You know, we're an investor with a couple of the largest biotech VC funds in the world, and the market just felt closed for a while. Then it opened way back up. How do you explain that? How do you sort of see that? Why does that happen?
Well, the opening's happening, but we look at it this way. First, we look at the VC numbers and who's investing in these private companies. The reality check for us over the past years is that the VCs are flush with cash, but they're sitting on the sidelines. They're watching and waiting. The biggest issue for them, Scott, was that there were many investments made during the early pandemic year that companies raised money. They did their last private round, and then they went immediately to an IPO too early. So companies that did that often went public without having any catalyst to maintain the stock price. So the stock plummeted. These companies, these are ones that are struggling. The VC sat on the sidelines. They're now focused on quality and quality only, making fewer investments and bets on what they believe will have greater number of news triggers or milestones. So that was the first thing that we saw. Now, as we've gone into 2024, the market's starting to open up. And once again, we've said biotech is back. It's just getting back. And I spoke with an analyst with Piper, who's a good friend of mine, and he said that based on his analysis and the work that he's done, including with IPOs, we should see a steady stream of deal flow and a potential positive market well into the later part of the year. Should be a good time.
That's fantastic. You've built this wonderful career and a wonderful leadership career. What advice would you give to developing leaders, emerging leaders?
This advice I just discussed with a CEO or a chairman of a company over lunch today in Coral Gables. The recipe for success in being a good leader and being a good business person, in my opinion, is number one, be great at what you do. You've got to be phenomenal in your performance of your job, which means you have to stay up to speed. You know me, Scott, I get up at 5 a.m. I'm in the gym like you, reading early in the morning and sharing articles. Why? Because that's when news breaks. You've got to be up on things. So great performance in your job, but that alone is never enough. Great relationships. So we say that the recipe for success is one part great performance, one part great relationship, and now you're off to a good career. And have fun doing it, because this is our livelihood. As I say, at this stage of my career, I do this because I enjoy it. And we're going to continue to do this as we progress and see these companies come up. And ultimately, there'll be good opportunities for everyone.
And talk about sort of the future of biotech, because you live a lot in the biotech world. It seems like there's so many emerging changes and trends and so forth. How do you figure out where to focus on that? Or is it more opportunistic based on where your clients are going? How do you look at the different areas in biotech and where you focus?
So we are very heavy science in orientation. As I've mentioned, many of my staffers are PhDs. They come from academia. They come from research positions. The focus of our work is usually dictated by where science is going, which is the core of our business. So think about it. When I look at some of the cancer treatments in development, the new approaches with cell therapies and more, it's because of the research that is completed, the research that is published, and then ultimately through tech transfer gives rise to these companies. That's how we move. And we get caught up from time to time in the hype and buzz, just as, you know, everybody says, Scott, add AI to your business plan and the valuation will skyrocket. The reality is that we say, with most of the businesses with which we work, these drug development companies, most of them have AI in use in some capacity. So if they don't have AI, they're probably atypical. But our focus, once again, is heavily based on the science. If the science is supporting it and the investors are following that, we're in the mix too. Because remember that our role is to help create the public profile so that a company can do deals, raise money, attract talent, which is important, and then ultimately follow its path, either to commercialize a product, or many of the emerging companies, they're ultimately going to be taken out by the bigger players, and we've seen a lot of that.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you visited with the CEO or chair of the board today. When you see the chairs of boards, the CEOs that are really doing a good job, what do you see that they're doing that's so effective?
Well, number one, I say the people who are truly passionate about their work and are good with human relations, that's what. The discussion I had today with the executive was, is he moved from chairman and CEO to just chairman. I said, you know what? We miss you, because when we had meetings, when you were involved with meetings with bankers, it was personality. You had stories that were relatable. Now, at times, we look at executives and they're too stiff and one-dimensional in how they perform. They're focused almost as an accountant looking at a checklist. We need these leaders to remember that it's all about the relationships that will help to determine the results. We used to work with a private equity firm out of New York. And if you walked into the office of the founder, right behind him was a sign, and it said this: relationships determine results. And every time we met with him and we had a discussion about something with the team, he would remind us by pointing to the sign and saying, remember, David, this is exactly what it's about. So it's truly the leaders I see are the best at interpersonal communications, finding ways to build a relationship, common ground. They're not there just to do the business at hand and leave. And this is what we teach all of the people who work with us today. Go out and mine your network, but you need a network in place to mine in the first place.
And talk about that passion, because you mentioned it a couple different times. You've got to be passionate and motivated and excited for what you do. How do you cultivate that passion? How do you encourage people to cultivate that passion? Because that's often the secret ingredient, and it's not always easy to develop that and move that forward.
Well, I think that especially in our business where we're laser focused on emerging healthcare companies, is that because we hire people who have invested time through training to learn the science, these are many are PhDs, they've done postdoctoral research, they already have inside of them this desire to focus on science. They're curious, they're great students, but they didn't like the work they were doing. They wanted to move from a lab where they were performing experiments. So in this case, we're taking the passion and we're applying it to something else that they can do with their careers. My business partner, Tony, at one time wrote a chapter for a book that was alternative careers for scientists. I couldn't sum it up any better, Scott, than what we do with the PhDs. So I think that first, depending on what someone's interests are, they have to go and explore how they can apply whatever training they've had. And if they have to make a U-turn at some point, that's okay too. I don't think that you can teach somebody to be passionate about something where the passion doesn't lie. It has to be inside. And it's evident based on the performance of the team member. When we see team members who are fully immersed in our work, you know that they live it. They get up in the morning, they're hungry, they read, they share information, they present ideas. Others, as we often say, are just going through the motions. But I think that in our case, because we know we want people who are subject matter experts, we simply find the subject matter experts who want to take that expertise and apply it elsewhere from where they were working. So passion, you've got to have it in you, and it should be obvious just based on the energy and the way that you interact.
Thank you. I listen periodically to different speakers. You know, I periodically hear like Scott Galloway from NYU on certain things and other people on things. Who do you listen to? Who do you enjoy listening to? What motivates you, inspires you? Business thinkers, business leaders, and anybody that comes to mind that is has been impactful in what you think about and how you think about how you approach things, or motivating.
Well, so first off, I do read a lot. I don't listen to many podcasts except a few. We work with them in our industry, but you'll find this interesting too from your sports background. I listen to some of the coaches, because if you think about a coach, the coach of a professional team or a college team, especially college, has to be motivating. I am very good friends with the head football coach at the University of Miami, Mario Cristobal. Do you know that Mario was the best man at my wedding? Mario is like my brother, and Mario was an intern in my PR firm more than 30 years ago. When you listen to Mario speak, what you hear and pick up from him is genuine passion. You know that he speaks from the heart. You know that he's not scripted, and he's believable. That's why he's successful at, number one, recruiting athletes to come to get a good education and play at Miami, and two, taking what is a very challenging situation of assembling a team when you have players who are freely able to go out in the portal and leave and come and go on their, it's amazing. He can tie it all together. That to me is very inspirational because he's always in the spotlight and he has to be, what I say, direct, and he has to be real. That to me is inspiring.
No, fantastic. David, it's always great to visit with you. It's always inspiring to me to visit with you. Thank you for joining us today on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. Thank you very much.
Scott, always a pleasure. Good to speak with you, and we'll speak with you again.